Alright, let's look at Standard 18 Substandard E. This standard is meant to show us that, during the New Deal, FDR really didn't have his own way. He just walked through this easily, the New Deal programs and all. They had a lot of challenges, political challenges, and so that's what we have to do is we have to identify the political challenges to Roosevelt's New Deal program, his domestic program, and to his international leadership during World War II. And including, there's that word including, three things here we have to talk about: Huey Long, the Courtpacking bill, and the Neutrality Acts. All those are challenges to FDR, either domestically or internationally, in his leadership. So let's look at a visual real quick. In challenges in his domestic leadership here, we see that Huey Long and the Supreme Court is going to declare a lot of his New Deal programs unconstitutional. And so he's going to ask to pack the court or add more Supreme Court justices to kind of accept his New Deal program. And that's going to be very controversial. We're going to talk about those two things in just a minute. The Courtpacking bill and Huey Long are his domestic challenges to leadership. And then over here in the international, meaning within the world, he's going to have Congress is going to be a challenge to his international leadership because of the Neutrality Acts during World War II. He wants to help out Great Britain, but they won't let him. They pass these Neutrality Acts and nope, don't draw us into another world. Isolationism. We want to stay neutral. Don't get entangled in these foreign alliances. And so we're going to see these challenges come forth. We're going to look through these each one by one. Okay, so let's look at the first one, the role of Huey Long. And Huey Long is part of his challenge to domestic leadership, and meaning to challenge to the New Deal. Huey Long here, a challenge to his domestic leadership or his New Deal programs. Huey Long is from Louisiana. He was a governor there, became a United States Senator in 32, supported FDR, but then quickly separated from him. He's going to be a critic of the New Deal program, and he's going to argue that Roosevelt didn't do enough to eliminate inequality in America. Huey Long thought there was too many rich people out there. Well, actually less of the population, 4 or 5% of the population owned everything, and 80 to 90% of the population didn't have anything at all. So he opposed the New Deal program because he felt like it didn't do enough to redistribute wealth, take from the rich and give to the poor. It's kind of like Peter Pan type of thing. That he didn't redistribute enough wealth to ordinary citizens. So he thinks that the New Deal program wasn't given enough to the people. So he's going to run for president. He's going to start a campaign for president in 1936, and he's going to promise every American a home, $5,000 in cash, food, clothes, and an American education, among other things he's going to promise people. And a lot of people accused Huey Long of being a socialist, and he said no, he wasn't a socialist. He was following the Bible and the Declaration of Independence. But most of his programs were more socialist than the New Deal and FDR. But he's a critic of FDR. He wanted to do more with the government. One of the things he said was, "I'm for the poor man. All poor men, black and white, they all got to have a chance. They got to have a home, a job, and a decent education for the children. Every man a king." That's my slogan. And that's what he run on this Share Our Wealth campaign. That's what he's going to run on in 36. Every man a king, Share Our Wealth Society. And he's going to run for president. He starts up his campaign in 1935, gearing up for the 1936 election. And here he is. Here he says, "We only propose that when one man gets more than he and his children and children's children can spend or use in their lifetimes, that then we shall say that such person has his share. That means that a few $1 million is the limit to what any one man can own." In other words, he wanted to limit how much an individual could be worth, how much money. First he said $1 million, then he changed it later on to $5 to $8 million, depending on investments. But so that the government could take the rest of the money and then redistribute it back to the poor. So we're looking at here is socialism, the government taking money from people. But he runs for president, and here's one of his speeches he gave. and he's quite a character. But let's watch this.
According to the tables which we have assembled, it is our estimate that 4% of the American people own 85% of the wealth of America, and that over 70% of the people of America don't own enough to pay the debts that they owe. How many men ever went to a barbecue and would let one man take off the table what's intended for 9/10 of the people to eat? The only way you'll ever be able to feed the balance of the people is to make that man come back and bring back some of that grub he ain't got no business with. According to the...
That's his ideas of redistributing wealth to poor people during the Great Depression. Huey Long was the biggest critic of Franklin Delano Roosevelt because he felt the New Deal failed to redistribute enough wealth to average citizens or ordinary citizens who were suffering during the Great Depression. On September 8, 1935, in the Louisiana state capitol, before he could even run for president, this doctor here, a physician, wanted to speak with Senator Long. He brushed him off several times. And Dr. Carl Weiss from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, about 4 feet away from Huey Long, shot him in the stomach with this model 1910 .32 caliber pistol and killed him. And then his bodyguards shot and killed Dr. Weiss. This same gun, the same model and all, was used in the killing and assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand that started World War I. Just a little side fact there. But Huey Long was assassinated before he became president, and after that he wasn't a problem to FDR. Okay, let's turn our attention to Courtpacking bill. The Courtpacking bill is also part of this challenge to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's domestic leadership. In other words, his New Deal programs, that the Supreme Court had a habit of striking down a lot of FDR's New Deal programs as unconstitutional. And FDR became frustrated with this, that the Supreme Court would strike down his New Deal programs after they had passed the legislature and after he signed them into law. So the Courtpacking bill was an attempt by FDR to appoint one justice for every person who was over 70.5 years old. So that meant 5 more, and you see this cartoon as 6 more, excuse me. 6 more, so that would add to 15 justices instead of the regular 9. And his supporters of the New Deal program, he wanted these 6 new justices. He was going to appoint 6 that would support his New Deal programs. And a lot of people felt that, he was only trying to circumvent and exercise too much power, more than the Constitution allowed for them to have. So a lot of people really were not into this. Even his supporters of New Deal programs thought that he was kind of pushing it too far. And this shows FDR tattooing a member of the Senate here, or the Senate, and his Supreme Court packing case right here. Some cartoons of the time. This one, his critics kind of showed him as a dictator. In other words, trying to take over the court and revise it, to reorganize the government, to get his way. He was trying to usurp too much power, and they compared him to Adolf Hitler. But it was during this Great Depression, this national crisis, and World War II, the FDR is going to assume a lot of power as the executive branch. But a lot of people are criticizing him for doing what he did. Here's one here that shows him as power hungry. There's Congress's huge bold reorganization program. And here's one that shows, how, the protection power of the Supreme Court has been trashed here. Him trying to circumvent the Constitution pretty much. And this one shows the Supreme Court as the arbiter or checks and balances between the Constitution or New Deal legislation, between the legislature and the president. And this checks and balances in the division of powers. And it shows how he's trying to change the rules of the game pretty much. And here he is saying, I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. And people, really didn't like this idea, even the supporters. So eventually, he kind of throws in the towel and gives up because he sees his Courtpacking bill is not making any progress, just stirring the kettle and causing a lot of trouble. So he pulls out of his Courtpacking bill attempt. Okay. All right, now let's look at the international challenges or challenge to his leadership as political challenge to, and we're talking about the Neutrality Act here. And so his on the international challenge side was in Congress, these Neutrality Acts, and what they were attempts by Congress to keep the United States out of war. And FDR, as President of the United States, knew that he could probably lend weapons to Great Britain and France, the Allies, against Germany during World War II, but they kind of put a halt to that when they passed this Neutrality Act, saying it would be illegal to sell or loan any weapons to nations at war. Let's look at this first. The Allied powers at the time were Great Britain, Russia, and France before the United States entered. World War II starts in 1939 in Europe, and it ends in 1945. But the United States really doesn't enter until late 1941 and then early 42. But France had been totally taken over by German Nazis under Hitler, and they were totally inundated. And then Great Britain over here, the United Kingdom here, here's an inlet here, was getting bombarded with shells. So they needed the United States to help join the Allied powers in this World War II, but against Germany, Italy, and Japan, the Axis powers. But Congress, to keep the United States out of war, passed these Neutrality Acts. There's really more than one, and said that it was illegal to sell arms or to make loans of money or weapons to nations that were at war. In other words, the president cannot send aid to Great Britain or France or Russia or any other country involved in war over in Europe. And so this was a move to keep the president, FDR, from dragging the United States into World War II. And what we're talking about here is, we talked about this before, George Washington's neutrality, and then at the turn of the century in 1898 we went to expansionism, and we became a world power, and because of that, that entered us into World War I. We tried to stay neutral, but unrestricted sovereignty warfare pulled us in. But right after the war, when Wilson tried to get the League of Nations passed and Treaty of Versailles signed, the United States senators, those reservationists, and all, they wanted isolationism within the United States. So our foreign policy in dealing with other nations become isolationism. So all the way up to December 7th, 1941, we stay isolationist and isolated and neutral. And these Neutrality Acts were part of that. Here's a cartoon showing, kind of what FDR was going through. Here's Uncle Sam. Here's some of the senators over here that want to keep us out. Do nothing. Don't join. In other words, don't go over there. Here's isolationism on the snake here. And here's FDR begging, help them, help them. But here's a different one we just saw. U.S. Neutrality Act shows that we have all these goods we could loan to Great Britain and France, but we can't go anywhere with them because of the Neutrality Acts. And here's FDR beseeching Congress, please, let's help them. They're burning down over there, and we got fire coming this way. In other words, Hitler was on his way to the United States. We're going to pick up this later on the Lend-Lease Act that is eventually going to be passed. But right now, we've met this burden of identifying political challenges of Roosevelt's New Deal domestic program and his international leadership trying to get the Allies help from the United States. And we talked about Huey Long, the Courtpacking bill, and the Neutrality Acts, and we've kind of shown a visual representation of these things too. That domestically, challenges to FDR's leadership were Huey Long and the Courtpacking bill, the Supreme Court striking down his New Deal programs. And then internationally, the Neutrality Acts were a challenge to his international leadership. And I think that's it. And if you have any questions, ask them in class. Good luck on the quiz, test, and the EOCT.